Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Holly Corbett. I'm VP of Content for Consciously Unbiased, an organization with the mission to build belonging in the workplace. So it's no secret that AI is moving really quickly and is impacting the workforce. So today we're here to talk about how at the board level, AI oversight is important in terms of ethics as well as value creation. And, we know all the research that says, gender balanced boards outperform those who are not gender balanced. And it's especially important in the AI era for boards to be gender balanced to prevent algorithm bias, avoid blind spots, and build inclusive technologies. So we have an amazing team of thought leaders here today to talk about what it means to be board ready, why it's so vital that women's voices are represented on boards in the AI era, and key questions boards should be asking about their organization's AI strategy. So I'm going to introduce our guests. We've got Natalie Benamou, founder of Her C-Suite and the Board Ready Summit. Sujata Dayal, independent board director at Emergent Biosolutions. Jean Meyer, founder of Authentic Intelligence, and Indrani Palchaudhry, founder of Open Origin and of the Regeneration Generations. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Holly.
Great to be here with you.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, I love bringing amazing groups of women together. And I guess we can just start off by asking you, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do? Because I know we all have different backgrounds, and share a personal story about why it's so important that women are involved in the implementation of AI. And Natalie, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much. I'm Natalie Benamou, the founder of Her C-Suite, a portfolio career network. We help women land board roles, and we also help them with the AI conversation, driving AI forward. So this is the perfect merging of my two favorite topics. And I first started thinking about AI when I was researching for my board role that I'm on, Her Health X. We are launching an AI platform to help bridge the care communication gap for patients and caregivers. And I started seeing a trend that there really weren't that many women leading at big companies, in the news, on boards, and I started getting curious. And so as a result, we've also in Her C-Suite launched Next to Lead AI, but more so I started really feeling that it's so important that women in this moment need to not just be fluent, but we need to lead this conversation forward. We need to help other women understand the importance of what AI has to offer now, but also in the future.
Thank you, Natalie. That's important work. Super excited to have you here. And Jean, do you want to tell us a little bit about your work?
Sure. I am an advisor who works with companies to help them build, protect, and fix their reputations, especially in high stakes moments, and you just need it handled. I have been doing this for more than 3 decades. I'm I guess, a recovering corporate executive from the entertainment, tech, and media industry, and I work with those types of companies right now. I'm also highly, highly curious about AI. Like so many of us, I've really gotten into vibe coding and also how brands are now being surfaced in new ways because consumers' habits have shifted from traditional Google search to consulting their favorite BFFs that are LLMs. And I have really gone deep on that subject. And in so doing, I've discovered, run up against potential bias, the error rates that are still high that have nothing to do with, gender necessarily, but there's still big issues with AI. And I think a recognition of that and an understanding of that, in addition to all the other reasons that we need more women on boards, is very, very, very clear when you just look at it through the AI lens.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, it's changing search, it's changing visibility. So yeah, really important to understand how all of that works. Indrani.
Hello, I'm Indrani Palchodri, and I work across the intersection of energy, AI infrastructure, as well as I'm the founder of Open Origin, which is a green energy infrastructure company, and a chief vision officer there. And I'm also founder and executive director of Shakti Regeneration Institute, which is a female led, original peoples led nonprofit that works at the intersection of green infrastructure and ecosystems preservation. So I'm a filmmaker by background, worked for 25 years at helping brands to tell their stories as both a photographer and a marketing director. And what I've come to realize working with nonprofits for 25 years as a big part of my passion, that so much of the the work that nonprofits do to try to correct the problems that are created by our economic systems and by our for-profit entities work, it's not sustainable to be on both sides of the equation. And where AI comes in, it's so important that we recognize that clean energy infrastructure is a critical part of the AI journey, that it's not just a software, it's not just a tool, and the issues that it can create don't just involve replacing people's jobs. We're also using massive resources of energy contributing to emissions and water pollution issues. So the work I do at Open Origin is to build data centers and other infrastructure for industry completely emissions free and without impacting the local water and local energy systems. So I believe that as women, we have a great capacity for long-term views and for looking at the greater good as part of how our industries can really excel in the long range, and that it's a strategic advantage for a board to have women, have people of multiple um, economic and geographic backgrounds, because studies show that companies do much better when they have a diverse board. So I'm excited to be here and happy to meet you all.
Thank you. Yeah, there's so many different angles and impacts of AI, and I think to your point, that's why it's so important that boards are diversely represented to consider values from a human first level. Sujata.
Thank you, Holly. So I'm Sujata Dayal. I'm a lawyer by training, but for a couple of decades now, I've been a senior advisor and compliance expert. So did that in the corporate world. So a lot of focus on regulatory, things like that. I now have my own firm, Arzian, that focuses on being a compliance expert and, thinking about a lot of the ethical issues like AI. In addition to that, I'm on a publicly traded board, so maybe I'll switch a little bit to the board aspect. And I think boards need to be thinking a lot about AI and asking the right questions, especially if you're on the audit committee or the risk committee, and not only understanding the benefits of AI, but understanding the trade-offs. And when I think about AI, and I think back, and I'll tie this a little to women, um, women bring a lot of diversity of thought. As Indrani mentioned, we have a capacity for thinking strategically and much more broadly than just the question at hand. So I think women bring a big perspective, but as you think about companies relying more and more on AI is learning from all of us. And just like you would think about customers if you were selling or gene branding, you want to make sure that when you're thinking about branding or marketing or focus, that you're getting all the perspectives, and those perspectives represent the population that you're addressing. And AI is addressing all of us, and women are a big part of that population. So if we don't have women involved in AI or boards thinking about, diversity, we're missing an entire aspect of information. And as people become more reliant on AI, if we skip that aspect, we're potentially not educating ourselves fully. And
Mhm.
the other piece with women, frankly, is, one of the more common places that AI is used is now in hiring and screening, right, on employment websites. A lot of women answer questions differently from men. And if you create solid rule sets and don't account for that, you may inadvertently be leaving a whole number of very qualified people out of the candidate pool. So
Yeah,
just taking
thank
a
you.
slightly different focus.
That's a great point. And do you have like an example of how a woman might answer a hiring question differently than a man that would reflect bias in AI if it wasn't taken into account?
Absolutely. So this was years ago. And, as you're thinking about development, I had a vacancy on my team. And I really wanted someone on the team to apply. She had done an internship, she was taking stretch assignments, just really good. But you have to go through the process. And so I said, please submit your resume and you have to go through the process. There's a lot of people to make the decision. And much to my surprise, when the candidate pool came through, her name was not on the list. And I went to HR and I said, I'm a little surprised. We have a very strong internal candidate. How did this person not make the pool? And it was interesting because the system had been programmed with yes, no answers. And one of the questions was, do you have FDA experience? And she took it literally as, I've never worked for the FDA. And she answered no. And so I called her into my office and I said, how did you answer that question? And that's what she told me. And I said, but what about all of the FDA regulatory review you've been doing, all the conferences you've attended? And she said, I didn't think to add that. And I think that happens to a lot of women, where if we don't feel like we can absolutely back it out, we sometimes dismiss the experience that we have.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really great example. And it's also an example of why it's important to include a human lens when in the hiring process when we are utilizing AI. Um, I guess I'm curious before we get deeper into the board conversation. There's so many, AI is such a broad topic. I'm curious as to like what is one practical way each of you are using AI that you found is helpful, and what is one thing that keeps you up at night? So is there like a tool or a certain process you use to leverage AI that's helpful? Natalie, do you want to start?
Sure. I use AI every day, but I also use it on a weekly basis. I've created AI agents for this, and I do a strategic brief for the program that I lead inside her C-suite, but it's from a woman's lens of being on a board and also an entrepreneur. And the interesting thing is that I have to reprompt it over and over again because it comes back all the time with the articles that I'm not asking for, the tools that I'm not asking for, and it takes almost longer, if not longer sometimes, to use it. And I like to say I DJ between, different the top LLMs to get this report that so I read it and then I do it. And so I think that a lot of times we think that AI is going to be a time saver, and it actually is not always a time saver. I'm here first person to tell you, even if you have all the programming correct. And I think the thing that keeps my mind thinking about is really not just about our generation and the thing that's exciting because it makes it accessible for everyone, but younger people in their 20s have been largely impacted adversely with entry level positions and things like that. And so for me on a personal level with two daughters in their 20s, that's something that keeps me pausing and thinking about it in a different, with two lenses, one for business, one for boards, all those things. And then also on a personal level, the impact for younger generation.
And the impact of the workforce at large, right? If we're
Yes.
eliminating some of these entry level positions, then we're missing that part of the pipeline. So that's a really important point. Thanks, Natalie. Jean, do you want to share how you're using AI and what keeps you up at night?
Well, sometimes vibe coding and my enthusiasm for it keeps me up all night, but not because I'm worried, because I'm like sucked in. And that did actually last night. I, I think I like so many consulted, and my journey has been pretty similar, but I've very, very enthusiastically embraced Claude Code in particular, and setting up skills and things that make my life more efficient. And I'm also doing this for many of my own clients, kind of developing GPTs for, a particular company's brand voice and things like that make it easier for them to make sure that what they're saying comes across with something that's consistent with their brand ethos. I rebuilt my website over the weekend. I've built lots of administrative tools for me to engage with clients. So it's great. It's cool. And when there's like a new shiny object that comes out, I'm usually one of the first to try it. So when OpenAI launched Sora, the video generation app, and I think their first iteration of that was to position it as like a social network. I went all in. I had a lot of fun with it, but it turned on some major red flags for me, some watchouts, because in my first encounters with asking Sora to create video of me and being very specific in my prompts, I am a female. This is, I'm 5'3", I'm wearing a blue suit, I'm walking out onto a TEDx stage, and I'm doing a backflip. And that was kind of the prompt. The first 4 tries, it came back with not anyone who resembled me, but a male. And kind of, obviously that was something that threw me, because I was very explicit. And then when I kind of push back again, female, woman, etc. The 5th try, it did deliver something that looked a little bit like me, but I landed right on my head, and I would have broken my neck if that had been a real world thing. So that was the first real encounter that kind of woke me up to the potential issues for gender bias in AI. Now, that's all fun and games. It's a funny little video, but what it suggests is that AI is basically, there's nothing new under the sun. It is training on history, right? It's not looking forward, it's looking backwards. And when you look at history, it hasn't necessarily been the kindest or the most equitable to, everyone in the population, particularly half of us who are women. And that's a problem. So, in terms of what I really, really strongly believe is, if we are going to have an impact on board seats and in other ways, we won't unless we embrace it, use it, put it into motion, train it, feed it, as much as anyone else. And if we don't, if we just use it as a glorified search engine, we're missing the plot and we're missing the opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also a good reminder that like AI isn't this magic ticket that you can just input something and the perfect thing is going to come out. That we as women have to make sure that we're involved in training AI,
Yes.
so that it equally represents us. So next time you
Well,
put in
I'll just pile on to that. I am concerned about the impact of AI on the traditional publishing and media industry, because of course it's completely disrupted the model that digital media has been living with for the last 20 years. And it's gone to a 0-click model. So the traffic that Google used to send to publishers has disappeared. It's literally upended the business models, and they're struggling. But AI still lies, hallucinates. There's issues with the answers it comes back and the citations. I think a recently updated study that the BBC and a trade group for broadcast in Europe did found that there's still something like 45% of large language model answers kind of across the board, all the different platforms, 45% of them come back with an error.
Wow.
80% of them have some little problem, but 45% have a blatant lie, an error, or something wrong with the citation. And not only that, but when AI lies, it shows up and it lies with confidence.
Mhm.
So, you really do need to be caveat emptor when approaching the answers and the resources that you're depending on from this.
Mm.
Don't get lazy. My new favorite word is lazy with an AI in the middle of it. And many of us do.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Jean. Great points. Indrani, do you want to share how you're using AI and what keeps you up at night?
Sure. So I lead work spanning 5 continents, and I convene science policy forums alongside the United Nations General Assembly, as well as founding Open Origin and Shakti Regeneration Institute, where I'm executive director. So I use AI to as a part of my work for translating complexity, technological, ecological, geopolitical areas, and synthesizing into strategy. I find it very useful for both compartmentalizing work and bridging those compartments. And I think that AI's greatest capacity is to really solve the global grand challenges, which is my passion. So that's what keeps me up late at night is exploring new ways, new technologies, and new ways to combine possibilities to be able to solve very specific challenges in places like the Amazon and India, where our nonprofit works, as well as using the capacities of global infrastructure creation to help long-term strategic economic development that is sustainable and that allows us to live within our planetary boundaries.
And do you have a favorite AI tool that you're using currently?
Well, I use many different tools. That's my approach. Is I like to play them off against each other because they do hallucinate. They do have capacities to draw the wrong conclusions. So by checking each step of the way with multiple different AI platforms, I find I get very robust results and a really diverse um, sense of perspectives. Uh,
Mm.
I I find that the issue is not AI itself. It's AI without leadership and without infrastructure that can lead to negative outcomes. So by really phrasing the questions carefully and working with my teams as well to really understand what the humans need, what the value proposition on the ground is, then AI can be really helpful in combining the resources that we have and gathering other possibilities. So researching is incredibly useful, and synthesizing and pointing to which authorities to speak to, the humans at the other end of these conversations are the critical part. But the AI tool can help us to evaluate who might be useful in these conversations.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. So AI is not the issue, it's AI without leadership. So that's a really key point to remember. Sujata, how about you? What are
Sure.
you?
So I use AI both personally and for work. So on the personal side, I use it a lot for planning trips, travel, putting together, lists that help me, menus and things like that. And then I use it on the professional side for a number of things. So I use it for research. Um, I often do training for people, so I'll create case studies or documents, and then I have AI kind of look at it and say, how could you say it better? So it's like getting a second critique on it. But a couple of caveats. So I have to remind, and I use Claude a lot, although I do use OpenAI as well. And I like Gemini for graphics. So I play around, but I think so. Claude is probably my go to, but I do think it's important, and I think this comes out of everybody else who spoke before me, is knowing the LLM you're using and what its strengths are, because not all AI is equal. So depending on what you're doing, there's different programs that might work better for you. I also, to Indrani's point, will occasionally have AI validate each other's work. So I'll be like, does this make sense? And it's kind of funny to watch these LLMs criticize each other or critique each other. And then I'm a compliance person. I believe in trust but verify. So when you ask me what keeps me up at night, Jean, you kind of mentioned it, hallucinations, right? There are many instances, especially in the legal field, including more recently, where a very reputable law firm had to withdraw their brief because AI had created its own cases. And so they had to issue an apology, and it was obviously a hallucination. And that goes to my trust but verify. I think, Indrani, you bring up a good point. There's a skill to asking AI questions. And so I don't know about the rest of you, but I sometimes look at the answer and go, oh, wait a minute, I probably didn't ask the question as tightly or as appropriately as I could. And then the piece that does keep me awake at night is, and I think this has been brought up by everybody, an over-dependence on AI, because to the point made earlier, it is history. It does hallucinate. And just like when I went to law school, we used to have to go through the books and re-verify all the citations, even if I was using a program like Lexis and Nexis. And I think we all see that in the work we do. Actually, there's a very recent case where the FDA, well, not a case, the FDA just issued a warning letter to a manufacturing company in April. And the reason they got this warning letter is because they had used AI to create all of their CMGP standards, and they actually missed a few. And what I think the gist of the warning letter is not that you shouldn't use AI, but there was an interesting phrase in there, which was make sure there's a human in the loop. So that picks up on Indrani's point. And so that's what really keeps me awake at night, including to a degree the loss of privacy. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'll have conversations, and the next thing I know, my news feed is full of articles about dental veneers because I went to visit my friend who had a root canal. So just throwing that out as a little levity, but also real.
Yeah, that's definitely happening. To take it back to boards, I think we hear from, women, at least in our community, that they want a board position. They want to start looking, but they don't think they're quote unquote board ready. What advice do you have for women who are looking for boards but don't think they're ready? And Natalie, I guess we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think we hear a lot about people thinking they're not board ready, and generally it's because they don't have alignment with the board type that they're trying to get on. So Sujata is a perfect example. She got on a public board, and that's unique. Her journey is so unique because most people do not start on a public board, but she's amazing, and I'm not surprised that she got on a public board. But I think it's understanding, first of all, that getting on a board is the highest position in a company, and you have to understand what it is what value do you bring, and you have to have all the pieces aligned. But there is a board type for everyone. I always believe that. It's misalignment with understanding, like thinking that I'm going to get on. That would be like for me to think that I would be on a public board, my first board role. I probably wouldn't be that person, but there's certainly advisory board roles. There's industry board roles that I could be on and other things. And so it's just really thinking about your experience in a different way and not as a resume. A lot of people make that mistake, is looking at their resume. And the first thing that we need to do is really think about, how do we add value? What unique thing can we do from a growth, transformation, and risk perspective? And that is one of the things that would make it easier for the conversation to start.
And do you have any advice, Natalie, on how women can seek out boards that are in alignment with the value that they bring and with their experience? Like, where do they even begin to look?
Well, I think it's before looking, you have to know the things that you want to do, right? So if one of the biggest mistakes is calling someone up and asking advice and asking them, what board type do you think I should qualify for? Let me send you my resume, my career resume, instead of a board bio. The board process is very specific in how to go, but where to start is in conversations with having a coffee one-to-one and asking questions of the other person. And at the end, then you can share what's up, what's new with you, Holly. Well, actually, this year I'm thinking about pursuing a board career. Oh, really? Tell me more. That's how you do it. It's not telling people right away, I'm looking to get on a board. That's one of the things that people are like, well, what type? I don't know. What do you think? Here's my board bio. What do you think? So I think there's little tiny things that people can do that make it easier. And it starts with a conversation. We don't need a huge network. The number one boards come from probably the closest 25 people. Sujata shared a story. She knew that person. She gave her name in a room where she wasn't. That's how boards happen. So where to start is really with yourself first, in understanding what values do you add, and then look for companies that are aligned with those values, and not start with there's 5,000 different types of board, 5,000 companies. Well, those are not all going to fit for you.
So yes, getting clarity within yourself and what you
Yep.
want and the value you bring is like the first step.
Absolutely. Yes.
And Jean, do you want to share your experience or any advice you have to women?
Yeah, I mean, I find what you just said to be very valuable. I think there's we overcorrect, however, women on wanting to have every one of those boxes checked before we go for it. And I think that it has to be a process, and you shouldn't hold yourself back. I'm sure, there's that study after study that shows that women aren't going to raise their hand for a job description where they don't believe they've met every single bit of the criteria. And I'm afraid that might translate to being a contributing factor in why women are not represented on boards in a commensurate way, in a reflection of the population and the customer base of some of these companies. I think just being curious and understanding the process is a big part. And again, knowing yourself and what you contribute. It's not just something that a woman who's spent in her entire career in a financial capacity, although that is super, super, super important, but there are other ways one can contribute to board with different types of backgrounds and perspectives. And, I do, this is a little off topic, but I think it bears repeating. When you just look at big tech and frontier AI, there's still, kudos to Microsoft. You've almost gotten there with 40% board representation from women, but everyone else is down in the 25 to 30%. OpenAI, Anthropic too, actually being on the lower end of the scale. That includes Apple, Meta, all of those companies, wildly underrepresented. So I think having confidence, understanding what you can contribute, being curious, really understand what the board process is, what the different committees are, what is a governance versus audit versus, there's so many different ways you can contribute. Just getting smart on it, I think, is a good first step.
Yeah, yep. And those are all great points. And I think it is a balance of, having clarity within yourself, but also just going for it. I mean, AI is in this really beginning phases. And so it's a great opportunity for women to jump in now in these developmental phases before it gets too far. So I think it's an exciting time for women to be going for board positions, especially in AI. And Johnny, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that many women are already making board level decisions. They're managing risk, leading teams, building partnerships, raising capital, and shaping culture and protecting reputation. that's what boards are looking for. So I've been very fortunate to serve on a number of not-for-profit boards as well as for-profit boards, and I think that's sort of a wonderful route. That experience working in the nonprofit world has helped me greatly for the profit-driven world as well. And so my advice is to build your board narrative around the questions of what expertise you bring, you know, increase your capacities by serving others first, through the nonprofit approach, and help boards to understand the risks that they may be ignoring entirely. A lot of the work I do focuses on the externalities that are currently priced outside of the economic system. But because of my passion for the environment, my passion for communities, original peoples around the world, and education, I've learned that these impacts will also be tremendously important for-profit boards to plan around, because very often they're out of touch with the local communities and with ecosystems and factors that they consider to be outside of their purview. So what I've found is being interdisciplinary and really understanding the stakes of our current situation in the world and the future is really, really important to all kinds of different industries. The other thing I would add is that women need to recognize that their expertise can extend far beyond their own subject matter areas. If, for example, the work that we do to protect ecosystems is extremely critical for a number of industries that are not traditionally viewed as, that they've not worked in the space of ecological concerns before, but that doesn't mean that those concerns aren't incredibly important for them and for the customers at the companies that they serve. So readiness is not about knowing everything about the specific company. It's about understanding value, risk, strategy, and accountability, and long-term consequences. So yeah, and especially articulating the unique expertise that you bring, that can often be far more complex than a straight CV could lead one to understand. So I believe that women have the capacity to plan for the future extremely well, and those expertise factors, managing a family, managing future generations. These are all areas in which women have traditionally excelled and can be very relevant to how boards view and understand their customers and their role in the world.
Yeah, and so from a practical level, really building out your board narrative and focusing on skills maybe outside your area of expertise is an important step. And I do want to touch upon something you said, Indrani, about I deeply believe in the need to redefine value. And I often say, like, if a company is, making billions of dollars in profit, but is pillaging the environment and burning out its workforce, is that really a valuable company? And I think what you're saying is that as boards, the highest position in a company, these are important considerations. So not just the bottom line, but the impact to local communities and the impact on future generations. So thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely.
Sujata?
Yeah, so, I think all three people have pretty much summed it up. So maybe I'll try to summarize versus add. First off, most of us are much more board ready than we think we are. And I think that, we've talked about it, women hold ourselves back and things like that. And I apologize. I've got my son's puppy here, so if she's disturbing, I'll try to talk over her. That's part of juggling, right? That's what women do. So, first off, I think you need to get past the readiness. We all are much more ready than we are. When you think about boards, and I'm going to pick up on something that Natalie said, not all boards are equal. So, I was fortunate to get on a publicly traded board very early, but understanding the types of boards you're focusing on and what they look for is really important. So an advisory board may be very different from a publicly traded board. So understanding the board, the organization, and what skills they're looking for are important. I think experience is really important, but figuring out how to highlight the skills you bring to the table, because a lot of us get, if you're doing not-for-profit or other things, get on boards that aren't necessarily identical to our work experience, but we bring skills to the table. So I think really thinking about the skills you bring, how they would connect with the type of board that you're looking for, and focusing on that. And frankly, and Natalie taught me this, your board CV is not your job CV. So rather than talk about, I led an ad campaign or I executed on a government decree, it's oversaw a government decree using the following skill sets I had, built relationships, things like that. So you kind of need to take your skill level to a slightly higher level and use your experiences to highlight your skill, but lead with your skill set, not the experience. Because I'm a regulatory compliance lawyer. Compliance lawyers are a little more in demand, but the more obvious board members are the financial person, the CEO of a big company, the PE firm. And so being able to say, yes, I'm a compliance person, but here's all these skills I have and why they're relevant to you is important. Networking. Believe it or not, most people don't know you want to be on a board, nor do they think of you as board ready. I've told Natalie this story, but when I was interviewing for the board, I called a mentor who's mentored me. I've worked for him personally. We're good friends, and said, hey, can I talk to you about being on a board? And what skill sets you look for? And he said, sure, when you're ready, we'll set up a conversation. And I said, no, I have an interview next week. And he immediately, being the mentor he is, he immediately got on the phone. But what it said to me was somebody I knew so well had never seen me in a board role, either because he didn't think I was interested or I had not displayed that capacity when we were there. So don't be afraid to ask. If we don't ask, we don't get. And so that's the other one. And then, Holly, I don't know if you want me to cover it, but my board journey was a little unusual, but I did learn a few things along the way.
Yeah.
So I have been on a board of a not-for-profit for a while. Actually, I'm on 2 or 3 at the moment. But this call came to me from a recruiter, one of the very large. So when we talk about network, and yes, more likely than not, your board role is going to come from somebody you're close to. I actually got a phone call from the board team at one of the large recruiters, and that's the other thing. Look at your LinkedIn profile and make it attractive so that when those recruiters from Korn Ferry or Russell Reynolds or Heidrick are looking, there's things out there that stand out on your resume. But this person was a partner at one of the larger recruiting firms, had never worked with this person before, but it turned out that I had worked with one of his partners for a job, and she had put into the description a lot of things that appealed to them as a board member. And so I get this email, don't know this person, and it says, would you be interested in a board position? And my immediate reaction was, is this a joke? Nobody does this, right? But I ended up responding because I was like, well, the email looks legit, went through the whole process, and lo and behold, I got my first board. So that's where I would like people to walk away with the possibilities are endless. You just need to make the ask, do the networking, and show that capacity and skill. And it will come. And I would not dismiss not-for-profit boards. And Ronnie, I think you said it well when you talk about passion. Some of the best experience I've got were on the 2 not-for-profit boards I was on, because I sat on a nomination and governance committee. I sat on finance, So those experiences were things I could translate in not just the interview, because you do end up interviewing for a board position just like you would for a job, but they could see I cared about things and I had brought skills to the table that made sense. And maybe this is the last thought, which is a little bit of a digression, but in the interview, a lot is about your background, but a lot of it is that board and other people, as they're interviewing you, wondering what you're going to look like or feel like around a table. How do you handle disagreement? How do you influence? What is your style of dealing with people? Because it is very important in that role when you're with 10 other board members, or maybe it's 20 for some of the bigger companies. They want to know that when they're sitting across the table from you, you're somebody who's going to speak up, bring up issues, but also listen. So a lot there, Holly.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts going through my head, but we always say at Consciously Unbiased that emotional intelligence is a bigger predictor of success than even IQ. And so like bringing EQ to the boardroom is really, really important, and being able to use your voice and also to step back and listen is key. But some of the points that I took away from you, Sujata, is okay, experience is important, but don't lead with it. Lead with your skill set, right? Because you can go in different directions focusing on your skill set rather than pigeonholing you into only where your experience lies. Don't be afraid to ask, because if you don't ask, you'll never know. So put it out there that you are interested in looking for a board position, and then just the power of your network. So you don't necessarily need a big network, but you need to be networking and having the right people in your corner, and the power of mentorship. You mentioned your mentor. So,
And the last piece, believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, others won't.
yeah.
And I would like to add to that, Holly, you asked what can someone start with? And if you are at a big enough company, see if you can present to a board or help prepare the documents for a board, or attend, ask questions about what that company is doing. Have coffee with the board directors. Ask them about what's it like being on this board. It's all about curiosity. Board directors are curious learners. That's why AI is so amazing, is because you can use your curiosity in learning. And that's why women really make we're curious learners, I think, by nature. But the first thing is really just being curious and learn about your own company, or if you're not at a big company, talk to other people about what are they seeing? What are trends? Ask questions like that to open the door for conversations.
Yeah, and really quick, just for women who are just maybe thinking about this at the beginning of stages, can you give a quick overview of some of the different types of boards?
Are you asking me, or I don't know?
Yeah, or
Okay.
anybody who wants to, you or anyone who wants to jump in.
No. So I think we've all talked about nonprofit. We're all on nonprofit boards, so I won't go over that piece of it. But I think one area that we may not think about is a family company board. And the difference, Sujata was talking about interviews and the type of experience. A family company board can be really big. You think of the Walton family, you think of, J&J, versus there's also family businesses that run big farms. So there's a wide spectrum of family farm or family boards, but that's also, they really care about the personal relationship. So Sujata was talking about, they want to know how you're interacting. So a family board is one that's a little less expected. There's always, people think of PE and VC, and the PE and VC, they have people, independent board directors representing them on the companies that they have invested in, because they want to make sure that their investment is going to return, and each has a very different perspective on that. There's privately held company boards. There are many different, there's startup boards. There's a wide range of types of boards that I'm mentioning. And so I really do believe there's a board type for everyone. It's kind of understanding what interests you and where can you add value with beyond your expertise, like everyone's been talking about skills, but it can be your a compliance officer, you understand regulation, you could work in a fintech company, for example, because you understand regulation. So, but from different types of boards, I'm always surprised of like, oh yeah, I forgot about family boards, but they're really big family boards, and then there's smaller family boards, but they all are looking for that relationship. And I think someone also was saying about that family, being able to transfer those skills, and that would be a place that might work really well.
Yeah, the only one I would add is to just know that advisory boards are sometimes a little different.
Yes.
So especially startup companies will ask for a board of advisors. That tends to be a little more hands-on and skill-oriented. So you see it, for example, in the biotech and even some of the smaller AI companies. And in those ones, while you're a director, you're also an advisor and a little more hands-on. So that's more of a hybrid type of situation. And if you do take an advisory board position, I would really take the time to find out what the commitment is and how much they're expecting you to roll up your sleeves and how much is, just advisory work, because that changes.
Okay, great advice on getting clarity about the involvement or the level of involvement. Jean, I wanted to ask you, you're a communications coach who helps your clients show up in AI search. So just to shift gears a little bit, what are your thoughts on how women creatives can build a future that more equally centers women's voices in the content?
Well, again, usage. I think as we were convening on this call, or within the last day, Pew Research released their most up-to-date study on AI usage. And there's a section that goes into gender, which I thought was fascinating. And I think not surprising, what the big gender note is that with LLM usage, the gap is closed. So there are almost as many women using large language models as men now. Men are using them more frequently. And I would argue they're using generative AI in different ways beyond search to build things. So I think the critical thing is that women should leave that intimidation behind when it comes to actually kicking the tires on these tools. There are organizations that are cropping up with women kind of helping other women do this. And you're not going to break anything. Just go in and try it, use it, because when you're using it, you're informing it, you're training it, you're impacting how it might, develop something else in the future. The other thing is, really, AI is becoming like a utility. It's everywhere. And one does not necessarily need to be technically proficient to you get benefit or give input into AI. When you look at Apple, their most recent development, they have made the decision to make AI very much in the background of their products and their watches and their phones and stuff. It's certainly helped Siri become a lot more useful by miles. Strategically, I found that very interesting. They're taking a backseat to letting the frontier companies do the heavy lift. That's one thing. The second thing, which I find fascinating, is we have choice as a consumer. I am very partial to Anthropic and Claude because I believe in the values that they have. They have a constitution. Claude has a constitution. Claude has guardrails, and it is learning and shaping. And it was introduced in 2023, but it just got updated this year. I think the fact that they even had the foresight to do that, and it's being led by a woman, gives me hope, and I think that's really cool. So stay educated, use it, give inputs. The other thing, maybe this is something that will eventually become part of board readiness, and is AI discovery. So AI likes trust, it goes through a hierarchy in developing its answers. And what's interesting is you really can't pay your way to AI discoverability. You can't buy ads to make you show up first in AI search, at least not for now. 94% of content that is informing large language model answers is what we would call earned media. That's news coverage from trusted sources, it's government blogs, it's trade publications, medical journals, things like that. And it also includes a lot of user generated content. You may have heard that Reddit is a huge impact, Reddit threads and conversations, Amazon reviews, Yelp reviews, TripAdvisor reviews. Those things are consulted in developing AI search. So I think just understanding how that works is important. And potentially, if as a business person, audit your own company or brand, or yourself as an individual, to see how you show up in search. And there are tactics you can use to not game the system, but really make sure AI sees you as opposed to regarding you as invisible. AI likes structured content, Wikipedia pages, press releases, blogs. It looks to make sure, do you have a website? It certainly will consult LinkedIn. LinkedIn has now come out of nowhere to become the biggest driver of business related queries. So understanding how AI is looking for the answers and applying some strategies that can change how you or your business shows up is another big step in the right direction.
And so for the audience, Jean actually teaches workshops on this, on how to audit yourself and show up more in AI search. So we will get you information on how to find out more about that. I took a class with her and it was extremely helpful. So thank you for all of that practical information. I know we're almost out of time. I did want to ask you, Andrani, when it comes to, since you do a lot with sustainability, when it comes to AI adoption, how can leaders focus on sustainable AI implementation? Because right now it's all about speed, like trying to get there the fastest. So how can leaders balance that?
Well, the AI era is asking us to redefine intelligence. And the focus within AI is on speed and prediction and automation. But the human element of judgment, discernment, and responsibility becomes even more important when we are, working with and in opposition in some ways to this. To artificial intelligence. And what goes behind that, the infrastructure, the energy sources, the water usage, the community disruption aspects, those are all really important for us to consider as we utilize this tool. What are the costs and how can we do it in a way that is less harmful? AI is not just a software decision, it's a governance decision, an infrastructure, a workforce, and a brand decision, and a capital allocation decision. So the companies that lead in the AI era won't just be the fastest adopters, they'll be the companies that scale AI with energy certainty, with stakeholder trust and operational resilience and public legitimacy. And that will become an incredibly important factor. So if you build your AI infrastructure on a platform that is disregarding its harm to communities, it's disrupting the energy of the grid, it's polluting the waters. Ultimately, that is not sustainable, and that will come crashing down. So much better to invest in AI and ways that you can be part of the future of resilience of humanity, and avoid the economic fallout of being on the wrong side of history. So I think it's important that our responsibility is to help ensure that AI growth is not built on extractive or fragile systems, but on clean, reliable, resilient infrastructure that supports long-term economic value, climate alignment, and community benefit.
Yeah, so public trust is going to be key in AI. So, making sure that the public trusts you as an AI platform is a very smart market decision and business decision. So I know we're out of time. I would love just to, let the audience know where people can go to find out more about you. And I did want to say Natalie has some summits coming up that to help women get board ready. So we'll start with you, Natalie.
Thank you so much. I'll be really fast. We have 2 programs at LinkedIn, LinkedIn being the most trusted source or one of the most trusted sources right now in AI. Build your next AI agent. And this is all in Chicago. And then a board ready summit a few days later. So you can find out all of that on hercsuite.com or reach out to me. I'd love to answer any questions. It's been so wonderful. Holly, thank you for having me today.
Yeah, we've loved having you. Thanks for sharing your insights, Natalie. And Jean, you want to share where people can go to
Yeah,
learn about
sure.
you?
I will be conducting 2 workshops with a colleague for brands and also for content creators separately about AI discoverability in July. Best thing to do is just follow me on LinkedIn, Jean P. Meyer from Authentic Intelligence, and that will make sure you'll get the, connect with me, send me a DM, and I'll make sure you have all the details.
Amazing. Sujata?
Yeah, so the easiest way to follow or connect with me is on LinkedIn, Sujata Dayal, just exactly like it's spelled. I'm happy to help with advice, compliance, or even if you want to talk boards and, run a board resume by me, whatever I can do to help.
Thank you. Indrani?
Yeah, I'm very much on LinkedIn under Indrani Paul Chaudhry. You can also learn more about Open Origin, openorigin.industries, and the Regeneration Generation, the film and alliance that we're developing with Shakti Regeneration Institute, the nonprofit that is supporting this intersection. And you can find all of that through LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest. And I'm very interested in connecting with leaders and boards and investors and companies working at the intersection of AI, energy, and infrastructure, as well as women's leadership and original people's intelligence systems, which need to be incorporated into our artificial intelligence systems.
Thank you all. I learned so much today from this conversation. I hope our audience did too. So yeah, please stay connected and thank you all for sharing your insights.
Thanks, Holly.
It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you.
What